Hello to you and welcome to another video. I've been asked where my character Jack Sparks came from, who is the lead character in The Last Days of Jack Sparks, the novel, and so I'm going to try and answer that question as best as I'm able. Where did Jack Sparks come from? I think the simple answer is that he is the worst in all of us. Hopefully this won't sound like a cop-out. But yeah, he is basically the worst of us, especially when we're on social media. Jack is the urge that you get when you want to try and get a celebrity to retweet you, or basically just whenever you're trying to get some kind of attention for yourself on social media, which is, you know, a large part of why we are on social media, whether we'd prefer to admit that or not. So yeah, Jack is our stupid social media underbelly, our worst impulses and our ego let loose. And I found Jack extremely, some might say worryingly easy to write because and I have a theory about this. It's because writers spend their time at one extreme or the other. Generally, when it comes to ego, we're either thinking, as we write anything, we are either thinking, this is the best thing ever, the entire world needs to read this, or there's been a real injustice, or we're thinking, this is an absolute piece of dirt and no one in the world must read this. And there really isn't that much middle ground. I mean, occasionally you can be writing something and you can think, oh, this is pretty good, you know, this is okay, which is quite damning in itself. But generally we go from one extreme to the other. I mean, writing for publication in itself is quite an egotistical thing, because you're writing all these words and you're doing it for the purpose of other people reading them. So you have to believe in it. But maybe it's because it takes that kind of belief. It takes so much belief to write that maybe that's why we can occasionally, all of us, we can just all kind of mentally collapse occasionally and go, oh God, this is rubbish. And I actually think that's a healthy thing. That's a really good thing. Self-doubt is good. As soon as you stop self-doubting yourself as a writer, then you kind of become that seasoned actor who no longer throws up in a bucket at the side of the stage before they go on. You have to have self-doubt, and you can't have too much ego, but you need enough so that you can write and keep on writing without being paralyzed until you're done. Have I gone off the subject? I'm not sure. I don't think I have. Jack. Yeah, I was talking about why I found it easy to write Jack. And the reason I found it easy to write Jack is because of that aforementioned flip-flopping that writers do. And when I was writing Jack, I could just let that egotistical side of the author out, completely unfettered and unbridled. Those are two good words, aren't they? I'm pretty sure they just mean much the same thing, unfettered and unbridled. So I'm typing away and the ego is just flooding out of me, and that's why it's so much fun. And hopefully that's why it's fun to read as well, because maybe for the reader, Jack is there's a hint of, even though Jack's a terrible person, maybe there's a hint of wish fulfillment with Jack, where as you read him and the things he says and does, you kind of wish you were able to do that too. I'm going to sneeze now. So yeah, the egotistical side of Jack came from the dark side of all of us, and certainly me. And I don't know, maybe in my 20s when I was a rock journalist, there might have been times, especially after too much booze, when a certain sparksy side of me came out. I mean, when you're writing characters, it's all too easy and all too pretentious to say, oh, I'm just channeling this muse, you know, this spirit. No, it's a part of you, really. Some even if it's a tiny part of you that you're exaggerating a millionfold, it's still a part of you. And I think we all have we all have an inner tosser, and in my case it was quite easy to let that inner tosser become an outer tosser. Yeah, I was conscious, even though Jack's a terrible person and he he can be really annoying. I mean, he puts some readers off almost at first. For all I know, Jack might have put lots of readers off and they may not have continued. But I was conscious of drawing the line with Jack, so hopefully the reader didn't just get entirely turned off by him. For one thing, I don't know if you've read the book. I don't know if you may have noticed that Jack is kind of, for instance, he's kind of, well, he's relatively right on and sort of, politically correct, and you would kind of assume that he might be quite left wing. Actually, he's not. I think if Jack had also been, a Jeremy Clarkson type character, some white bloke who thinks he's being really risque by saying politically incorrect things, I think that would have just been far too much, and I think people would have, your average person would just find that a bit too much. And so I was conscious of that. And of course, as the story goes on, without any spoilers, I don't want to spoil you in case you haven't read it, but people who've read the book will know that as time goes on in the book, we start to see Jack's emotional underbelly and certain things from the past, and maybe certain things he's not being entirely truthful about. So there is hopefully a three-dimensional totality to the character that goes beyond all the terrible behaviour and the egotism. So does that answer the question of where Jack Sparks came from? Yeah, I think so. He's the dark side of all of us. He is also, I suppose, he's an amalgam of all the sort of the more indulgent, self-obsessed journalism I've ever read. I'm actually a bit conflicted about journalists, for instance, who use the word I all the time in their writing. I tend to like it. It depends, though. It really depends. You have to do it well, and you have to be an interesting character in yourself. Journalists used to say I a lot more in magazines and newspapers and in writing in general, whereas now it really irritates me actually when you're reading a magazine article and instead of saying I joined the celebrity in the green room, the writer will say, insert magazine name here, joins the celebrity in the green room, as if the magazine is like some kind of gestalt entity. No, I want to know that an actual individual human being was joining the celebrity in the green room, and I want to know what they felt about the celebrity and how they got on as two individual people. But at the same time, it's weird. I'm really ambivalent about it, I must admit. I do want personality in journalism, but I don't want someone who is writing about themselves at the expense of actually covering the person they're interviewing. So that's interesting. So yeah, an amalgam of self-indulgent journalists and the dark side of humanity, especially with regards to social media. That is the answer to that question, and I'm now going to take my leave of you. If you've enjoyed this video, then please do hit like, share, subscribe, and that little bell thing, that little bell symbol next to subscribe, which will handily notify you next time I upload one of these videos to the YouTubes. Thanks very much, and goodbye.